Hello, beautiful, light-filled souls. I am so happy to be here with Sharon Milliman, who wrote A Song in the Wind about her near-death experiences. I also want to remind you to check out some of the classes. They're workshops on Zoom of about 10 different people, and you get to interact with, in one class, Daniel and Sylvie Garreau, who are talking about intuition. Rex is talking about manifestation, and there are several workshops that you might look through, and it's a great way to form community and get to know one another. But I'm so excited to talk with Sharon today because she had a childhood near-death experience. I consider 13 still somewhat of a child. And the first question, though, that I want to ask you about all of your near-death experiences is, what do you look around? So when you look around this world and you think 4 near-death experiences, all this time in the afterlife, what do people need to know who haven't had a near-death experience? What do you think would give them the most comfort?
Knowing that the love over there is so huge, it's so big and so perfect. And what I was told is the purpose of our life is to love and to be loved. And that what that means is no matter what you do, no matter how big or small the act is, if it's done out of love, it's huge. Whether it's doing the dishes, taking out the trash, mowing the grass, whatever it is, if you do it with love, it is so monumental that even though we think we're not changing the world because we're just doing our own little thing in our own little spot, we are changing the world in huge, huge ways. And it is so big to God. It means so much to him when we show that kind of love.
And it's a choice in so many different actions in so many different ways. You can either be loving and switch a dynamic, or you can not be loving. And I see people choose both, and I see their world change because of it. I don't know if you noticed this, but just in different work environments, you can see where someone has a vendetta against someone, and they want their position because they're higher up than them, and they create all this drama around this. And you find out this person at this other position actually wanted to step down the whole time, and they were really wanting to give it to this other person, and now they're afraid of them and they want to stay there because they don't want this person to run anything. And you see,
exactly, it becomes a circle.
This crazy dynamic. If people had only been loving, it would have all worked out.
Exactly. It's doing it in the loving way, everything comes out perfect because we're staying within God's order.
Yes. So I'm really curious. You write about some childhood experiences and being in touch with angels and the spirits. And your first near-death experience was at 13, but you said that you had some interesting experience as a kid. Could you describe some of those?
Well, when I was a little girl, I was terrified of the dark. And there were angels that would come out of my closet at night. And I actually grew up thinking angels lived in your closet. They would come out every night, and they had these little lights that they would carry. I don't know if they were candles or little lanterns or what they were, but they were little lights that they would carry. They would line my room, and they would sing to me until I would go to sleep at night. And this happened every single night when I was little.
Oh, that's adorable. Adorable. And you also write about your baby brothers who were in the afterlife, who you met in one near-death experience. Did you have a knowing of them before your near-death experience?
Well, when I was little, about 4, 5, and 6, somewhere in there, my brother Michael used to come to me all the time and play with me. And I think I was a middle child. And so there was my older sister who got all the attention because she was the older. And then there was my baby sister who was the miracle baby because my mom had lost the boys between. me and um, between me and my younger sister. I was only a year old when they died, so I didn't meet them, but Michael used to come to me all the time and we would play. And he, little blonde hair, blue eyed boy, and we would get into mischief like you wouldn't believe. Steal the brownies that mom had made for church, or get into the Flintstone vitamins, or run out in the backyard and swing on the swings. And then one day, many years later, my mom told me that she was standing at the window one day when Michael and I were swinging on the swings. And she said that she actually could see him on the swing with me as we were swinging. And that was just huge validation.
Oh, and so healing for her too, I bet, like to have that connection, as if your connection was so strong, it allowed for her to see her deceased child and to know what that would have been like, then that love continues on, that they're not gone, they're just in this other realm. And that's so beautiful, really, really beautiful. So the first near-death experience that you had was when you were 13 and swimming. So would you briefly describe what happened and then jump into what happened in the near-death experience?
Sure. I was taking swimming lessons, and my instructor wanted me to dive head first into the 10-foot section of the pool. And I just had this, I don't know, knowing, I guess, that it was not going to work. It was not right. I was terrified. I couldn't do it. And he told me, he said, if you don't do this dive, I'm going to throw you in. And I watched all the other kids do it and they came out okay. And so I went to do it and I just froze and he threw me in. And when he did, I struggled for a little while and then I sunk to the bottom of the full pool. And so here I am laying at the bottom of 10 feet of water. And there was this magnificent, it was a beautiful, soft white light. At first it looked like a light bulb, and I remember thinking to myself, why is there a light bulb in the bottom of the pool? And then the light kept getting bigger and bigger, and I don't know if I was going up to it or it was coming down to me, but it was just getting bigger and bigger and just enveloping me. And it was a soft white light, and it was brilliant, but it didn't hurt my eyes. And I felt warm and cozy and protected and loved, and I wasn't scared at all. I had no pain. It was just, it was, I mean, you would think if someone was drowned, they would be scared, but I wasn't scared at all. And while I was laying on the bottom, I could see outside of the pool, all the way around the pool. My mom was in the balcony on the other end of the pool where all the parents were sitting. And she stood up and her face, I could see the horror on her face and I heard her scream. Then I heard the female lifeguard who had the smaller children in the 2 and 3 foot section of the pool. And she screamed over at my instructor and she called him by name and she said, go in and get her. And then I looked at him and I could see him just as clear as he was frozen solid. He couldn't move. So there was a bunch of people running around the pool screaming and yelling and everybody was just panicked. And then as this light was just about to touch me, I heard what sounded like a metal door slam and it echoed. And then I felt all this horrific pain and I couldn't breathe and I was being, they were pressing on my chest and getting all the water out. I was coughing and throwing up water. And what happened was there was a lifeguard in the 5 foot section of the pool on the opposite side of me. And he had jumped in and got me. And he was doing the CPR and all that. And as I was laying on the side of the pool, all bunch of hands reached down and grabbed me, and I was laying there. And then I remember seeing into nothing but legs, all these legs and feet, and and then I saw my mom's face, and
so did you tell her about the light, or did you tell anyone about how you felt?
No, it was really strange because we never talked about it at all. And I didn't know what had happened, so I didn't know how to talk about it. There was no words. I had no words to even question my mom as to what that was. And I never knew what that was until I was older.
Interesting. And then you write, after that time period, so it sounds like you were very open as a very young child, communicating with your deceased brothers and seeing the presence of angels, and then you had this moment with the comforting light of the other side. What happened with this visitation from Jesus? What was that like?
Well, that happened when I was 15, and it was amazing. It was Good Friday, and I was a member of the youth choir, and our youth choir from church had gone to a neighboring church that's downtown and where I live. And during the little background about this was that there was some stuff going on in my life that was really bad, and I had gone to some adults about it, and I was told, it's not happening, it's in your head, you're crazy. And
Was this some sort of abuse or rape?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was I began to question my own sanity, and I knew it had happened. I knew it did. But when the people you love the most tell you, no, it didn't happen, it's all in your head, I just really, I never told anybody, but I was going to kill myself because I thought I was losing my mind. And anyway, that day, that Good Friday, we're in the bottom part of the church, the basement area, and we're practicing for our turn to go up in the main part of the church and sing. And all of a sudden, I see this man. And at first I said to myself, is that an apostle? I mean, I could feel his holiness. I just, you could feel it. But then as he got closer and closer to me, I could actually see who he was. And my mouth dropped open. I was like, and my mouth got so dry that I couldn't even speak.
So this was more, this wasn't like a sensation, like you're intuiting him. This was like just seeing him like you see me, but was there an added light or just a presence?
Yeah, it was very physical, and there were 4 other women that saw him too.
Hmm.
And when he appeared dressed like the rest of us and very approachable, not somebody that would scare me to death, or I would be and I was already in awe, because I knew exactly who he was, even though he was dressed in a white button-down shirt, blue jeans, and boots. But he had that long, very long, wavy, dark hair, dark skin, brown eyes, nice cut beard, and he had dimples when he smiled. And
Jesus has dimples. That's so cute.
He has dimples. Very handsome. When they said in the Bible somewhere, it says in the Bible that he didn't stand out in the crowd. That was from a man's point of view.
Right. When men write script, they don't write it correctly. Both versions.
That's right.
Female.
Well, from a female's point of view, he certainly does stand out in the crowd.
Oh.
But anyway, he came over and he asked me, he said, where do I go to sit? Well, I couldn't answer him. I mean, my mouth was so dry and I was just like stuttering over my tongue. I couldn't say anything. So the women in front that were sitting in front of me, they were two adults that were in the choir, and they turned around and they answered his question. But at the same time he was talking to them, he told me, he said, what is happening to you in your life is happening. You are not crazy. I love you and I'm with you, so don't be afraid. And that was the moment that I decided I wasn't going to kill myself. That it was, because he just out of the blue told me, that I wasn't crazy. It was happening.
That is divine in its beauty of that moment. And that's exactly what you needed, and what all kids and teenagers in those moments need, is to be seen and to be validated. And I'm sure you must have done that for other people, because I know, myself, when you've suffered something, you see it really quickly in someone else and you go ahead and validate it first. And that's really interesting that that's what Jesus did, has reminded you that you're loved like a child, that you will get through it, and that there's hope on a spiritual level beyond this physical experience and beyond the things that happen. For those who are skeptical and, might say, well, maybe that was just a very holy, intuitive, beautiful man who sat down, how do you know it was Jesus?
I've been around very holy men, priests and deacons and ministers and just healers and medicine people, and where they're very, very holy and they radiate a light. When you are talking to Jesus, there is no way that you don't know. I mean, he didn't have to show me the holes in his hands and his feet, because I knew who he was, and he knew I knew who he was. And it was just from the deepest part of my soul, I knew. And then not only that, but the other four women, the two women in front, he actually healed one of their arms. She had arthritis in her arm so bad she couldn't bend it. And when he stood up to go upstairs, he put his finger on her arm, and she was able to move her arm. He healed it. So it was those two, and then there was two other girls in front of them in the chairs that actually all of us saw him. Nobody else in the choir did.
Did things change after that moment with him, like in your life? Were you able to feel more grounded and certain about getting through the moments that you had to get through and surviving?
Yeah. Knowing that he knew what was going on, and he told me that, yeah, you're right, it is happening. You're not crazy. I no longer felt crazy. And like I said before, I decided at that moment I was not going to kill myself. And it was, I felt, I don't know the words. I was so in love with him. I gave my life to him. It was like, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, I understand what you mean. I have had an experience like that in a church years after my near-death experience, and it brought about great healing. So I do understand that when Jesus appears, it really is to heal something usually so painful in this human existence, and so hard to wrap your head around and your brain around how anyone could do that to anyone else and traumatize them in that way. And that is what Jesus wanted to wipe away in my life too, was child abuse, and really to disassociate my experience with Christianity with those people who claimed to be Christians. And that was, then suddenly they were just washed away, and I could just see Jesus in that moment. And so it changed a lot. I do know what you mean. Like from that point forward, you probably didn't judge Christianity in the same way.
I didn't really judge anything. And that was, I've always been a live and let live kind of person. And when I was little, my dad used to say to me, why don't you question things more? And I said, because God said it was so, so it's so. And I don't have to question it. That's it. And that used to blow him away because I just simply didn't question and I didn't judge. And it was,
And because of your experiences as a kid, your spiritual experiences and your near-death experience and your connection with Jesus, do you feel like you were very different from people around you, like in your 20s and 30s? Do you feel like you were just different in some ways?
um, well, in my 20s and 30s, I got real busy taking care of babies and working 12-hour days and trying to pay the bills. And so I wasn't as connected at that time because I was so busy living life that it was, but yet at the same time, I was teaching my children about angels and Jesus. And my daughter even saw an angel and Jesus on a cloud. And she came to me when she was like 7 and said, "Mommy, look, look, look." And I made her write it down on a piece of paper and I stuck it in the Bible so I would have it. But
Sweet.
it was, I guess it's a door that you can open and shut if you need to. But
Yeah. So what happened? And this one sounds pretty profound. You were struck by lightning in 2005. So was this the more intense of the near-death experiences?
yes, this was the big one.
All right. Let's jump in and hear the big one.
Um, Actually, I was hit 4 times. So it was like every other year until the big one. And it was twice by ball lightning and twice by lightning bolts. And um, then in 2005, when I was sitting on the back steps of my porch, it had started to rain. And my husband at the time, um, he was an electrician and he had just got home from work. So I asked him if it was okay to talk on a cordless phone. And he said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." So I remained talking on the phone. And about 5 minutes after he went in the house, I heard this loud crack. And I actually saw the lightning bolt come out of the sky and it hit my right arm. And once it went through me, it traveled underneath the house and blew out the transformer that was in front of our house. And our whole neighborhood was just without power for about 4 hours. But when the lightning hit me, it knocked me to the ground. And I had all this, terrible pain in my chest and in my arm. And it was just like searing pain. And then all of a sudden, my spirit just lifts up out of my body, kind of like peeling a banana. Just pops right out. And I find myself walking through into my house. And I'm looking all around my house, and everything had this burnt gold look to it. Even the air had this burnt gold look to it. And I looked at my kitchen curtains, and they weren't my curtains. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I had no idea I was dead. None. So I'm walking through the kitchen into the dining room, and the dining room furniture was not my furniture. And I hear this old time radio show playing something back in the 30s, like what you would hear on the Waltons. And I hear this sound and I can't find it. And I'm walking from the dining room into the living room, and that furniture is not my stuff. And I know my husband is home, but I can't find him anywhere. My kids are home from school, but they weren't in the house. So I started to really lose it. I started to panic. What? This is my house, but none of this stuff is mine. Where am I at? What is going on? And just as soon as I started panicking, I felt this huge loving presence with me. It was huge. And this love just filled me, and I wasn't afraid anymore. And within seconds, we moved sideways. We moved laterally. We didn't go up or down. And we went from my living room in the corner where I was standing into these beautiful pink and gold clouds. They were magnificent. and we were moving very fast through those clouds, but the whole time I was just wrapped up in this huge love from this huge being. And then we got to the end of the pink and gold clouds, and I'm standing in this magnificent garden. And these two young men approach me, and they're wearing ivory linen, a very expensive ivory linen cloth. Their clothes were made out of this. And I'm not sure why that was important, but it was. But they walked up to me, and at first I thought they were angels. And then it hit me like, oh my gosh, it's my brothers, my two brothers who had died as babies. And they were just beautiful, fully grown men. And they looked like they had just been out on the beach all day long. They were glowing, and their hair was my color. They had highlights in their hair. And when they smiled, they looked just like my dad when my dad was a young man. And we had this wonderful family reunion. And I kept saying, Dad would be so proud of you.
This is the brother, Michael, who you played with as a little kid, and then the other brother who died quite young.
Yeah. And Michael was a little taller than the other one, but they looked almost identical.
And did they talk telepathically? So you just felt your souls merging in this sense, or do you remember actual conversations?
No, we actually had conversation, or at least I thought we did. It might have been telepathic, and I didn't know that because I was just in awe of everything that was happening. And I was just kind of going with the flow. I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. That's how I was just over the beauty of the garden and the seeing them and this love that I felt, and I was just totally overwhelmed by all of it, but still had no idea that I was dead. So I didn't know what was going on.
Do you think you were just jarred into another time period for a moment? When your house looked different?
Yeah, actually, and I've been asked that many times. I do believe that I had gone back in time, been back into the 30s. I mean, that was what the furniture looked like, and that was sound on the radio that I was hearing. And I don't know if there were people there that actually saw me, but for a little while, I was a ghost. for just a couple minutes, I was a ghost.
And isn't that funny that ghosts could possibly be from the future instead of the past?
Exactly. Well, there's no time in heaven.
Yes.
So when spirit world, there is no time. Past, present, and future is all happening at the same time. So I didn't know. I really didn't know that. I was 1 minute I was in 97, and the next minute, 2005, and then the next minute I was in the 30s.
And did you get to stay there with your brothers for a long while, or did you move on in the near-death experience?
Well, they walked with me. They were with me when I had my life review, and there was several other people that came over when I had my life review. They were and they were all from different time periods, because there were some women in some real fancy gowns, and I was commenting about how pretty their gowns were. And then there were some men in fancy suits, and then of course I saw people in jeans or loungewear or whatever. And they all gathered around me, and I knew them from somewhere, but I didn't know where, and they knew me. And there was so much love from everybody. And then I had my life review, which was nothing more than looking at a black and white movie on a reel, an old-fashioned reel. And it was like from the moment I was born till the moment I died, but then it was over like a snap. I mean, it was just over that quick. And I didn't judge myself. Nobody else judged me. And it was like, that's when I learned that God doesn't judge us. We judge ourselves. And if you don't judge yourself, it's over real fast, and that's it, And I was just like, is that it? Is that all there is to my life? Something's amazing.
Oh, isn't it interesting that many of us get that message about judgment? I got that too, to be open and loving instead of judgmental in different episodes. Like that was a strong message from the life review. So that was the strongest message from your life review?
Yes. And and non-judgment, period. You don't, and if you don't judge, then you won't be judged because you don't judge yourself, and I didn't. I didn't know I was supposed to. So it just was like for information purposes only was what I got out of it. And it was like, okay, well, that was cool. Now what? What are we going to do now?
So what happened next?
Well, my brothers walked with me and we walked further into this beautiful garden. And that's when I noticed the colors were so rich and vibrant and the air was really sweet and it was clear, not like it is on Earth. You could see everything for miles and details, such details. And I heard this music and I realized that every single living thing has a vibrational sound. The rocks have a sound, water has a sound, the blades of grass have a sound, leaves have a sound, even colors have sounds. And when you put all of those sounds together, there was the most magnificent symphony I have ever heard in my life. And it was like every living thing was singing praise to God. And it was just so beautiful. And I was overwhelmed by it. It was so pretty.
This is a strange question, but do you ever tap into that now? Like, do you go outdoors and listen to the wisdom of a tree or the sky or the grass?
Every day. Every single day I have to go outside and I hear the birds. The birds were so loud. They were just singing so beautiful. So every morning I go out and I sit on my front porch and I listen to the birds. They'll come over and they'll sit on the tree right in front of me and they'll sing and I have this thing with birds. They come around all the time.
Oh, interesting. Do you think someone asked me this question in a video? He lost someone very dear to him, and he's getting a lot of feathers in his path that he's never noticed feathers before. Do you think that is a communication?
Yes. Oh yes. When my mom passed away, she had Alzheimer's, and I took care of her for 6 years of her life, the last 6 years of her life, and I was there when she died, and almost immediately I started getting these little white fluffy feathers. I don't have a bird in my house, but there would be feathers laying on the table, on the floor, in my car. I found one just the other day in my purse.
Wow. Messages from
I have a box, a little gold box that's just loaded with these feathers because I keep them.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, so that sounds like an amazing instruction to pay attention to nature when we're here. I do too. I ask questions. So if I'm going through a tough time, I might look up to the stars and ask a particular question, or listen to the wisdom of a tree and put my back against it and wait for that wisdom to come. And it comes, it really does. And sometimes it's even amusing. Like I asked a question the other night to the stars and a star just like leapt out of the sky like a comet in response. I was like, okay,
There
you go.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so that's beautiful that you heard the sound of that. And I like how you described you could see for miles, like that brought something back. I remember as if I could see over the hill, in the landscape that I saw during my near-death experience. What happened after that? So after you heard these beautiful sounds of nature, were you instructed to go back home, or what occurred?
Well, we just kept walking, and then I saw Jesus coming out of a grove of trees, and then he walked up to me. And when he walked up to me, it was like he looked exactly the same, and I knew exactly who he was. And he was smiling, and a beautiful smile, and he still had the dimples, and it was just, oh. When you're standing there with Jesus, everybody else kind of disappears. So I don't know where my brothers went. They took off. So I'm standing there with Jesus, and I'm looking around thinking, where did they go? Why did they leave? Jesus was telling me how much he loved me, not to be afraid. And it didn't dawn on me at that particular moment that meant I was coming back. He was saying, I'm always going to be with you. Don't be afraid. I love you. Remember, I love you. And then as he was talking to me, he walked me over to this wooded glen. And it was so beautiful. There was a stream, and there was a log, and all these tall pine trees, and there were pine cones laying around and stuff. So I sat down on the log, and on the other side of the log, there was a man sitting there. And I looked at him, and I knew instantly that he was God. And Jesus was gone by then. He must have walked away when I turned and was looking at the man on the other end of the log. When he looked at me, he had the bluest eyes I have ever seen in my life, and you could just look right into his soul and see how clean and perfect he was. But he said to me, he said, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" And I was like, "What?" And he said, "What would you do if it was just me and you?" And I was like, that question went totally over my head. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So he said, "Well, come with me." So we got up. Well, he said, "No parents, no husband, no children, no friends, no nobody, just me and you." I was like, "No, I don't think so, because you would really be tired of me after the first 10 minutes because I talk your ear off and you wouldn't like me anymore." He started laughing, and he has a beautiful laugh. But then he kind of waved me, told me to come with him, and we started walking a little bit further into the wooded area. And then he kind of waved his hand, kind of like opening up a zipper, and I could see the whole universe. I could see swirling gases and spinning planets and sparkling stars and all that. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, but it's so huge. There was no people, no cars, no houses, no nothing, just all that. And it was like, no, nope, it's too big. Nope. Tells God no, right? I was just like, no.
Oh, I told God no.
Do you?
We're stubborn.
Well, I told him no. It's not happening. I don't think so. So we went back and sat on the log, and he asked me again, "So what would you do if it was just me and you?" And I was looking at this tree, and I noticed the bark and the little life-giving veins in the leaves and the roots in the ground. And I saw the whole tree, but I also saw all the individual parts of the tree and how everything was connected, and how everything works together. And then I looked at God, and I said, and I don't know why I said this, because I don't know anything about the Quran. I don't know about Islam. I just don't, I've never learned that. But I said to him, "God, your 100th name in the Quran is God is everywhere, God is nowhere, and God is in me." He said, "Yeah, that's right." And I was like, okay. And then I said, "God, you made this tree. You are in this tree. So when I look at this tree, I see you." And he said, "Yeah, that's right." And so I don't know if he put these thoughts in my head or if I put them in my head, but all of a sudden I started thinking about my mom and dad. And I said, "Well, you made my mom and dad. You're in my mom and dad. So when I see them, I see you." He said, "Yeah." And so I started thinking further, and I thought, okay, there's a certain somebody and other people who have treated me very cruelly and have hurt me very deeply. But you made these people. you are in these people. So when I see these people, I see you. He said, yes, that's right. He said, now I have a question for you. And I said, okay. He said, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? I said, well, my normal answer would have been nothing important, just me. But that's not something you tell God, the creator of everything. You just don't say that. So I said, well, God, you made me, you're in me. So when I look in the mirror, I see you. And he was like, yes, yes. And he was so happy. His
You
eyes were
finally
sparkling.
got it.
Yeah, exactly. Took me long enough, but yeah.
Sweet.
So that's pretty much, I mean, we talked about other things, but then there's these two angels that appeared, and they were wearing these beautiful ornate dresses. They didn't have wings. They were just beautiful women in these beautiful gowns. And they took me from the wooded glen over to this beautiful, calm lake. And it was like glass. It was so calm. And they had me look down. And so I looked down like this, and I could see the earth through the water. And what they showed me was future world events. And what they showed me was stuff that's happening now.
Wow.
And so when this stuff happens, it's like, oh my gosh, that's what they showed me, you know?
So what specific things did you see that have happened?
Well, at the beginning of it, it was stuff that was connected to or as a result of the 9/11 attacks. It was the terrorists who were going to the different countries and were bombing. I saw people being bombed. I saw women and children as like human shields. And I saw the head, that thing. I mean, I just saw horrendous things. I saw governments falling and toppling over, coups and rioting. I saw there was a man in dark clothes who picked up something heavy and threw it through a plate glass window during a riot. And there was a building behind him that was on fire. I think it was a CVS or a Rite Aid or something. And it was on fire. And then I heard 3 gunshots, and they showed me this man laying in the street dead. He was a black man, and it was just horrifying to watch all this screaming and the fire and the gunshots, and then seeing this poor man dead in the street. And then they showed me another woman who was I think she lived in Canada, but I'm not for sure. But anyway, she had a white car, and her car was overcome by floodwaters and swept off the road. And her son, she had a son, a young boy in the car, and he drowned. And there were all these people that just suddenly appeared. They were angels in the form of people, and just pulled that little boy out of that car, pulled her out of that car, and brought him back to life. They revived him. And then apparently she went on to do some kind of spiritual video series or something. Then they showed me lots of earth-changing disasters.
And some that haven't happened.
I'm sure some that haven't happened and some that have.
Yeah.
They showed me 6 huge waves, those are the tsunamis, and some of those have already happened. They showed me it looked like a silver ribbon that ran from the top of the United States all the way down to the bottom and split the United States in half. And it was either a river or it was connected to a river. And this silver ribbon gets bigger over time. and splits the United States. They showed me water coming, you know, on the land, over along, like on the East Coast, Florida, Georgia, all of those areas. They just showed me lots of different things that have happened.
And why do you think that they took the time to do that? Do you think that they just wanted you to know that they were there with people as they passed on to the other side, or that some events are written in stone and others aren't, and this is just the way that the world is going? What was the intuitive message that you took from it?
Well, basically, when we live our lives in God's order, everything is peaceful and calm. When we move outside of his order, chaos ensues. And our world is the way it is right now because of our collective human selfishness. But what they were showing me or telling me or infusing in me was that it's not too late. We can change the course of events. It doesn't have to be that way. And the sooner we get that through our heads, the sooner all of this stuff will stop.
I know. You know, I watch a lot of TED Talk videos, and there are certain things that stick out in my mind, but the amount of money that Americans spend on Doritos, if we spent that, we could end human trafficking in the whole world. So human trafficking could be annihilated with what we spend on blue jeans or potato chips, and that's just one country. So if everyone, you know, like looked and allotted to their blue jean, you know, just didn't buy blue jeans for 1 year, just 1 year, people. And donated that to, you know, an organization that was working together, human trafficking could be ended. And I think that on one hand, there's not enough like good organization, you know, that tackles a problem in a way that really funnels the money to a particular cause and makes a huge change. Certainly there are great organizations, but they seem so scattered, you know, and doing good in particular areas. But yeah, working together, you know, combining efforts. And also, you talked at the beginning of this video, the energy of love too. So it's not even acts sometimes, but sometimes I do believe if all you can give is a good energy to this world and a prayer and love, that's something too, you know, sending love to areas that are in pain and that there's a lot of damage in those areas. Do you agree with that, or what are some of your
agree
thoughts?
with you.
What are some of thoughts about how we could make this world more in line with heaven?
When you see somebody that's sad, smile. Your smile can go all the way around the world in one day. And, you know, you smile at somebody and then they get on a plane and they go to another country, and they smile at somebody and they get on a plane and they go to another country and they smile at somebody. It's like a chain, and your one smile can go around the whole world in one day. And think of you know, if you see somebody that's not happy, or you can feel that they're angry or whatever, tell them, you look nice today. I hope you have a great day. Or give them a flower, or do something out of love, anything tiny, you know, just to make that person's day. And you'd be surprised at how quick negative energy turns into positive energy just by a loving word, a smile, a little gesture. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to spend a lot of money, you know. It just that love coming out of you,
Just caring,
can change the world.
yeah, just caring for this world and the people and animals and plants, and it is vital. I saw a guy on the bridge this past week who was about to jump off. So there's a toll road, and he had one leg over the bridge, and there was a big area for me to pull over. So I pulled over, and he was homeless. I could tell, you know, just his clothes were tattered, and he looked a little violent. He got angry, you know, when I stopped, but it got him off the bridge, and I got the authorities on the phone, and you know, they were able to come and talk with him, and it'll be probably a long time, you know, in the system for him. But no one else stopped. And it just hit me, like what were people going to do? Just drive by while he jumped off? I mean, do we care so little? That happened in the 60s where Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside of her apartment 17 times, and 38 people heard it, and no one called the police. And I think that collective that just allows for brutal things to happen and no one does anything, or allows for people to suffer, that has to change. We have to, of course, you have to be smart about how you get in and help people. And maybe it's just a little moment in some instances, but I think we have a responsibility to one another as a human family to connect when someone's in pain. I think that's vital. So yeah, I totally agree that that's one way to start changing the world. Is there more? Oh, good.
Even the trees and the flowers and the birds and everything, they all have, God made them. He's in them. His spirit is in them. So they are worth saving. So people swerve when you see a bird in the road. Don't hit it. If you see an animal in trouble, get out of your car, pick it up, take it to a vet. Just don't kick the dog when you feel bad. Yeah. Just love, because whatever you do that's loving is so big. You have no idea how big that is, and how much that just, it goes out into the universe and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will come back to you. So when you put out love will come back to you.
Yes, that what you said about the animal reminded me of a moment where there was a pigeon that had broken its wing or was just hurt near a Starbucks. And so one girl worked at a veterinarian's office, and she called the vet and asked if she could bring it there. So the guy behind the counter got a box. I got my jacket, and I asked the pigeon, I said, can you hop into this box? And we were all standing around, like kids and families and Starbucks workers, and the pigeon did it. It just like hopped into the box and put the jacket over it. And we were this one big human family who cared about this pigeon. And it was the best day at Starbucks ever. And, I remember that moment because we all got together based on love for a pigeon, and it was adorable. So yeah, you're right. Those moments, love spreads so quickly. So very quickly.
I did that with a dove, little baby dove. And I had the whole neighborhood at my house because they wanted to see this little baby dove. And she had a scratch underneath her wing from a cat. And I called the vet and asked the vet, what do I do? I didn't know how to take care of it. And she said, well, it's probably going to die and it won't eat or drink anything. So the lady across the street went and got a cage for me to put it in. And I held it up here against my chest so that my heartbeat would calm it down. And it did. She calmed down in my arms, and I just held her there. And then I put her in the cage, and I took a piece of toast and I scraped the toast into because I didn't have birdseed and I didn't know what to feed her, but she ate the toast, the crumbs, and she drank out of this little cap. I put a medicine cap in there with water in it, and she drank out of it. And she lived until about 3:00 the next morning. Something woke me up, and I went in to check on her, and she was dying. And I put my hand in there to pet her, and she lifted her head and she reached around and pulled a tail feather out of her tail. And she laid it in my hand, and then she laid her head down and she died. And it was amazing. She was so beautiful. I still have that little teeny tiny feather, but it brought the whole neighborhood showed up.
Wow.
To see this little bird.
I want to go back.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want to go back to something that you said in your near-death experience about spending time with God that really struck me and just stayed in my mind. Like, what would you do if you were there with God alone? That's an interesting question. Do you think what God is asking us to do in our lives as well. Like, I'm here with God in my life. What do I want to create on this world? God, create through me. In fact, that's one of my prayers sometimes, is like, not my will, your will, work through me in the most magnificent way that you possibly can. Do you think that that was part of the message, or do you think it was much more than that too?
No, I believe it is just me and God, and you and God, and your boyfriend and God, and my husband and God. It's just each one of us. It's all about, it's the relationship that we have with God, and that's what's important. It doesn't matter what relationships you have with everybody else. In the end, I mean, it does, because you need to love everybody. You may not have to like everybody, but you do have to love everybody. But in the end, it is all about you and God. And what, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it is basically,
yeah. God is our
your relationship with God.
Yes, that is the most important relationship. That is where you get your substance. That is where you get your power. Like so often people try to get their power from another person. And you get your power from God, and you get your healing from God, and you get your joy for living and your power for manifestation. And God surprises us too, because what our little brains concoct and come up with isn't exactly sometimes what God wants for us, but when we're living in that divine space, then it's really quite beautiful. And it is based on creation out of love. But that was really neat that you saw God as a human. I haven't heard that in a near-death experience before, but it sounded like your God and your God experience just allowed you to take it easy for a while and think about life. Is that, when you look back at that moment, is that how it felt?
Yeah. I have realized that being struck by light 4 times, it was God's way of saying, hello, I'm talking to you. You're not listening to me. I'm going to turn up the volume until you do. And so each time I got struck, it was bigger and more, until finally I died and I was standing in front of him. And it was like, now you're going to listen to me. Now you can't ignore me, because I'm standing right here in front of you and you have to see me and talk to me. So listen up.
Wow.
And I wasn't paying attention. So he was like, you're going to, guess what?
That really, yeah, that strikes me. And there's some questions that I want to ask about after effects and just life now, really. But one thing I've been thinking about this week is that when you've had a near-death experience and you listen to spiritual teachers or spiritual speakers or just different theories about the afterlife, sometimes things resonate with me and sometimes they don't. And, like I heard one speaker say one time, he's like, the energy that I've created in this room is like a near-death experience. And I was like, oh, no, it's not. You can't do that. You're not God.
No. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but sometimes spiritual ego takes over in people, and I don't know if what they're thinking exactly, or if they're just, I don't know, talking out of their ass or just coming up with theories, or what it is exactly that they're doing. But there are times when I look out at the world and I think, wow, people are actually buying that and believing it. I don't call people out on it, but like I hold this certain like bedrock of truth, and I look at it and my body is like my gut feeling, and my gut feeling is like, when you know God and you've been in the presence of God, God is this loving, amazing force who just wants us to be more loving. And it's a very simple message, and you can complicate it with downloads from aliens and downloads from crystals and this and and it's really simple. The message, people, is love. But maybe that doesn't sell courses, maybe that doesn't sell 15 workshops or whatever. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Do you, as a near-death experiencer, kind of look out at the world and go, it's a little more simple than people are making it?
Well, Yeah, when I was in heaven, I had what they call, I guess it was a download of divine knowledge. It felt like I had been hooked up to a giant IV bottle of knowledge. And I had all the answers to all the questions of the universe. I couldn't even ask the questions. I didn't know how to ask the questions, and I was getting all this information. And what I found out was God is very simple. And we humans make him so complicated. And he's not complicated at all. And how he put the world together and how he put people together is not complicated. And it doesn't take 10 chalkboards of equations to figure it out, because that's too complicated. And God is love, period. And it's real easy. And as far as when I look out and I see some of these very spiritual people, and then some of these people that say they're very spiritual, I see a fence, and I see how all humans tend to sit on top of that fence. And you can very easily, you can teeter one way or the other. And I've seen some that it's scary because they've teetered the other way. You know, they've teetered in a way that may not necessarily be of the light. And they're giving information out to people that may not necessarily be correct. I mean, there's a ton of information that we're getting from the universe and from angels and other beings and whatever. And there is good and bad. I'm sorry, there is light and dark. And, you know, a lot of people don't believe that, but I've seen it and I know that it's real. And sometimes whether it's ego or what, I don't know what it is, but they tend to tip off that fence and, you know, maybe are not giving, they may think they're giving information that's coming from the light, and it's really not. So we need to be very discerning.
Yeah, I agree that there are, as a near-death experiencer, like I've felt love in a country church. I felt it in a, you know, esteemed spiritual teacher. And then alternately, I felt like, ooh, cold, ooh, not good, you know, from an esteemed spiritual speaker. And then, oh, gross, you know, in a church, you know. So there's an energy of love that's connected to something that we instinctually know. And when that love is connected to spirituality and it is sent to people to uplift them, and like you said, like God said to you, do you look at yourself and love yourself as God's creation? If something in church is teaching you to love yourself and your neighbors and your people around you in that way, then it's probably a good instruction. But you know that there's so much ego in any association, I think, whether it's Christianity or spirituality, and it runs amok. And
Right.
it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it does. That's why we have to be discerning about what we're listening to. You know, what spirit is talking to you? You know, what are they saying? If it's building you up, if it's giving you confidence and making you feel love, then you know it's a good spirit. If you're listening to something and a spirit of something, you know, a spirit of anger, a spirit of jealousy, a spirit of whatever, and then all of a sudden you start feeling oppression, you start feeling a heaviness in your chest, you start feeling negative thoughts start coming into your head out of nowhere. That's all indications of a spirit not of the light. And that's why we have to be very discerning about what we listen to. You know, the negative thoughts, the negative talk, the negative feelings, that oppression, depression, whatever, that's not of God. But something of light that makes you feel it's light and airy, and you feel uplifted, and you feel joy, and you feel love, you know that that's a message you're getting from the light.
So my final question to you is, after these many spiritual experiences and these near-death experiences, what do you feel like your mission is, now that you're here, beyond just giving love and centering love? Do you feel that you have a particular message that you need to convey to people in any way that you can? Do you feel driven in that way?
Um, I know that I need to talk about the near-death experiences because I've experienced all the stages. I've been to the light, I've been to heaven twice, and then I've also been in the void. So I can talk to people about the different stages of death and let them know that there's nothing to fear in any of those stages at all. And the other thing is, do everything with love. It doesn't matter what it is. Just do it. And do it because you love your family, because you love the earth, because you love God. But just because you love, just do it. And that's basically it. I just need to share.
Wonderful. And you have the book out, A Song in the Wind, but then you also have a book of poetry, and you said you're working on a third book. Is that correct?
Yes, it's going to be called A Voice in the Wind. So it's the Wind series. And the third one is going to really, it'll have all four of those experiences in it, and kind of bring it all together.
Wonderful. And you'll cover it in greater depth, I suppose, in that book. That is so lovely. Well, I have enjoyed talking with you so much. And there was this moment in the conversation where I just kind of got lost in your experience, and I was there in heaven with you, and I felt the presence of God, and then I just kind of wanted to stay there with God and create. And so I know what you mean about coming back to this body, and that's such a high vibration place, and this is so much lower. And I know I said we're going to end, but is there something that you want to say about the difference and how jarring it is, in case other near-death experiencers are listening, between being in that space, you've been there many times, and then coming back to this body and this life? Is there any advice that you have for them?
Well, when I was there, it is a very high vibrational. It is extremely high. And then you come back here to this earth, and this earth is a very low vibration. And it actually feels like I'm walking in mud or wet concrete as it's drying. That's how it feels in comparison. And it takes a long time for these experiences for you to integrate them into your life. So be gentle with yourself, and know that there are other people out there who have gone through it and will help you and love you and accept you. And not everybody will, and that's okay. They don't have to, but God will guide you and direct you as to who it is you're supposed to tell your story to. And that's the reason why. I mean, near-death experiences is a God thing. It's not a science thing. It's not a dying brain or anything like that. And so there's something for you to share in your experience. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yes, I totally agree that you will most likely just run into people who have a glow in their eyes or light about them, and you'll know it's safe to talk about your experience. And then you will encounter some people who are skeptical and some people who are curious, and it's a mix. But I do think that talking about these experiences open others up a little bit more. And again, that's that spreading of that light and that spreading of love. But thank you, Sharon, so much for our conversation. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, and may you be blessed, everyone, and check out the links below for her books and for other information.